Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I work with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the United States. What sets them apart? A lot, but there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet, the people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The insight track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of the uncertainty of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Michelle Smith, thank you so very much for being our guest today. I'm so looking forward to today's episode.
Thanks, Bob. It's great to be able to connect and talk together.
Michelle, when you were younger, what did you want to be when you, and I'm using air quotes here, grew up?
I can honestly say I thought I wanted to be a college professor. And now if you ask me what I want to be, I still don't know. And I'm reaching the midpoint of my life and I've fallen into several careers. I think I'm on my fourth one. But I did go to college with the intent that I was going to become either a high school or college professor.
Working on your fourth career, you fit in nicely in terms of our subject matter of being in transition. So that's good. Why don't you share with us what your transition moments that occurred to get you from that picture you had of yourself as a young child to where you're at least now on that fourth career?
Sure. So I attended Seattle University and I was studying English. At first I was pre-law and then I was a psychology major. And then I thought, going into the master's in teaching program might be the way to do it. And then I can get my doctorate and I can teach at a place like this. While I was going to college, I had some financial aid, but I needed to work through college. And I was fortunate enough to get on with a small company called Voyager International in downtown Seattle. This is before Hong Kong went back to China. It was still under British control. And most of the large clothing manufacturers made most of their clothing offshore in Hong Kong in different factories. And Voyager had a sister company called Odyssey International that actually did make the clothing. My CEO was a small company of, I think, about 8 of us. He had started at REI when it was initially founded and then branched off and created this company. So I started as a shipping clerk for them. And this is going to date me so much, Bob. It was just when fax machines started. And our office didn't even really have computers. We were still typing things. Every night, my job was to take those typed pieces of paper, tear them up into little strips by whatever subject they were talking about, and then fax those back and forth to our Hong Kong office. Then come in and copy and paste, and literally paste with a glue stick, these into different files that were talked about each garment we were making. Then I also needed to ship samples back and forth internationally. So that was my first career. I worked for John McNulty, the owner, for 5 years because I took the 5-year college plan. I worked full-time in the summers, and then I started working full-time my junior and senior year, as well as finishing college. And I had every intent. I interviewed for the master's in teaching program. I was going to start it in 1989. And I paused before I signed the final paperwork because I was like, I'm finally making some money while working full time. If I go back straight into college, I'm going to be poor again. Maybe I'll just work for another year and put some money aside first. Well, like so many people who do that gap year, I never went back. I stayed in the clothing manufacturing company. I stayed there for another year and a half. And I was always kind of still the college kid. I got the grunt jobs. And I thought, this is not why I went to college. So I started interviewing for another job. At that time, temporary employment agencies, you actually paid them to help you find a job, if you remember that. So they found me a job at a property management company as a receptionist. And they were willing to pay the fee to bring me on. So I left Voyager and I went to work at Commonwealth Management, which was a large property management firm, again in downtown Seattle, that managed all kinds of properties. So I started out as a receptionist in property management. Within 2 weeks of hire, I was promoted to an assistant to a vice president and in property management, and I started doing commercial property management and was thinking, okay, is this really what I want to do? I really wanted to be a teacher, so I went back and started auditing some classes at night and thought, okay, I'll take the leap. Well, instead, I quit my job in property management and went back to Seattle University and worked in there as a clerk in their Albers School of Business, where I kind of looked at some other careers. Was I thinking, maybe I'll get my MBA or do something else. And while I was there, an opening showed up at Pike Place Market in their property management office. I went to interview there and ran away and joined the circus, which is what working in Pike Place Market is kind of like. I was a property manager there for 5 years. And if you're familiar with the market, there's residential units. There's about 500 residential units, as well as about 100 commercial tenants. And so I manage the commercial tenants for people like Pike Place Fish, where you see them throw the salmon back and forth. So I help them collect their rent and handle leases, et cetera. And after 5 years, I knew my dog would never see grass again. So I had the opportunity to move back to Yakima, and I fell into marketing when I moved back to Yakima. And then from there, I fell into workforce development. It's easy to change careers. I think people worry so much about it, they fail to see the opportunities in front of them. I've always just kind of thought, I was looking for a job when I got this job, so I'm going to take a risk.
Really interesting. Thank you, Michelle. We probably should have, when you talked about fax machines, mentioned to our listeners that they may want to Google that because some may not know what that even looks like. But thank you for that. So, Michelle, I'm going to do air quotes here again. Not being employed, being in transition, being in between jobs is not a place of shame. You are more than a job. End of the air quotes. What does that statement mean to you?
It means a lot to me because I have been unemployed and I have made the personal decision to leave a job without a job. And I've also been laid off before. And so I have taken advantage of unemployment. We all pay our taxes. And when an employer pays you, they pay taxes to the unemployment system. It doesn't pay your full wage, but it gives you enough breathing time to think about your life and to make the moves that you want to make and be more successful. You may need to find just a job, but you might want to find a better job. And the time when you're in transition is really the only time you get to focus on yourself and people don't think you're being selfish. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's a great time to look at all the skills and abilities you have and look at different careers. And, when you're a little kid, you get to talk about being a fireman or a policeman or a doctor when you're in first and second grade. You never get to do that again in life because you're so busy making a wage and paying for your bills. So I think being in transition is really a gift.
Let's say a friend just called you up and tells you that they've lost their job because their company is going out of business because of the COVID crisis. What's the 2 or 3 right away things that you would tell them to do?
First thing I would say is file for unemployment, right? Because that takes some time, especially right now. Try to stay positive. It can be very daunting when your life changes and you don't just wake up and go to work. Your whole thing falls apart. You don't have that normal schedule where you get dressed, you shower, you go there, you work for 8 hours, you take your lunch, you come home and you decompress. So the next word I would say is schedule your life. Take a couple weeks to grieve, because our careers, we often define ourselves by our jobs. So it's okay to be sad and cry or be mad that you lost your job, but then start scheduling your day. Get up and shower and then schedule. I'm going to, look for these jobs in the morning. I'm going to read some articles about reinventing myself from this time to this time. I'm going to take a walk just to clear my head. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do some networking and start working on my resume and thinking about what we call in our office dragon slaying stories. Those are the stories like when you saved that company money, when you saved a customer, when you came up with a new form that got rid of 5 other forms and 3 other processes, saving time, money, and making the company more efficient. Those are the things that you want to showcase on your resume and in your interview. And unless you're focused on yourself, you're not going to remember all those things you did. So start taking time to write all those down so that when you do craft your new resume, because you're going to tailor every resume for the job you want, you can use those great stories to show how successful you've been and how much you bring to the table.
Michelle, how should I use LinkedIn or any other social media tools to help me during my transition?
Before COVID, we could all go to chamber functions. We could go to business after hours, even workshops through Society for Human Resource Management, and meet colleagues and potential employers. Now that we're all kind of shuttered at home, at least part of the day, you want to start networking via LinkedIn. LinkedIn is what most HR professionals go to vet a candidate. They want to see what you've done because you can expand. It's like a virtual resume. You can talk about things that you wouldn't have time to talk about because you want to keep your resume brief. It's like a commercial to draw some interest. Facebook, you never know whose friends of friends, whose grandma owns a company who's looking for what exactly you used to do. I think instead of saying I'm out of work, I've been laid off, I've been fired, you want to say, I'm looking for a new opportunity. Do you have any ideas? That's actually how I found a job I had here in Yakima when I'd been laid off from a credit union. I had been in marketing and I ended up going into sales because a friend of a friend knew a position that was open.
When I'm stepping back and thinking about myself and where I want to go to, one of the things I think that I should be doing is to really get clear in terms of my strengths and areas that I can improve on. How best can I categorize those strengths and weaknesses in myself?
That's one of the questions, Bob, I always hate when they ask when you're on an interview, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Growing up, we were taught not to brag about ourselves. So I think we often fail to see how talented we are in some things, and we don't want to sound boastful. I think that you need to do, again, some journaling. And if you know that computers are maybe not the thing you're the strongest in, and in this technical world, we all have to be really tech savvy on a computer, you can get on LinkedIn Learning. You can get on Microsoft Imagine Academy through the library. I think you just need to become a lifelong learner, and you need to look at yourself a little more. Whenever I've been in a transition, I always reach out to a trusted friend to be my mirror. So I can say, here's what I'm seeing, and have them give me a realistic perspective. Because oftentimes I'm not seeing that I actually could do something. I discount myself before I try.
Now I know better about myself. Then I want to know more about potential companies that are out there. How do you do research in terms of companies that you might be interested in?
Like I said, you have to tailor every resume for the job you want. So the first thing you're going to go do is just Google a company. It's going to bring up their website, maybe their annual report. Then you're going to go and you're going to look at some trade magazines related to that. So, for example, with John I. Haas, I might want to go and read all about hops and the Good Fruit Grower magazine. I want to go look at some of your competitors and look at their companies. And then I want to go onto LinkedIn, and I definitely want to look at your company's LinkedIn page, as well as try and connect, or at least look at the profiles of the chief operating officers. I think that there's so much out there that you can find. Google is just a wealth of information. It's almost frightening how much is there. I wouldn't even step forward into even applying for a job until I had looked and found out about the company and its ethics, its mission, its vision, and their lead team. Everybody's got all of that on their website now.
Michelle, making any sort of job transition can be challenging even under best of circumstances. But what if I'm interested in making a major career pivot, say to something completely different, a completely different industry? That can be real challenging. What are the 3 or 4 things that you'd coach someone who is making that major career pivot? What should they do?
I think it depends on where you're at. Are you making this career change because you've been laid off at no fault of your own, or are you making it because you want to? So if you are making it because you've been laid off, your company downsized or something, there are so many programs available through the workforce system that I don't think people understand or know. I didn't know about it until I started working in the system. There's something called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act that was passed by Congress a few years ago, and it makes funding available for retraining. So you could go back, you could finish your bachelor's degree, you could retrain to become a machinist if you always want to work with your hands and get out of the office. You just need to connect with WorkSource in our office. But if you reach out to People for People, they can connect you with all kinds of employment and training programs where if you can't do it for free, they can offer you assistance and financial aid. They can also coach you through a career change. And then if you're wanting to do the career change yourself, there is a lot of financial aid available. There are people through our office at South Central Workforce Council who can talk to you about making a change. The main thing is you're going to need to set up a budget so you know what can you live on, and then start exploring those careers. You can do that online at worksourcewa.com, and you can look at all kinds of different careers. You can look at the labor market outlet info. So you can see if I want to go into this job, is it going to be a job where there's career growth? Is it a fading career? Retail sales, they may not be there anymore. It may be all online instead. I think you need to do your homework before you make the jump. But again, if you've been laid off through no fault of your own, you can make that change. You just have to reach out and ask for some assistance.
Michelle, how does being involved with outside activities, Chamber of Commerce or Rotary or any of those other activities, how does being involved with those impact your transition and the success that you might have in that transition?
I think a lot of people forget to put their volunteer experience on their resume. If someone's willing to donate their time and energy to be a volunteer, that shows their work ethic right there. They're committed to something outside their organization. They're committed to their community and to making Yakima or wherever they live a better place. So I'd want to look at that person as an employee before I'd look for someone else. And to me, I've been able to grow my network through volunteering. I was on the Yakima Valley Museum Board of Trustees for years. I worked with the Humane Society. I'm now on the Downtown Association of Yakima. And I'm also part of the Society for Human Resource Professionals when I'm not even in human resources. I think that you have to expand your network, get yourself out of your comfort zone so you can learn more and keep growing through your career that way, as well as making those connections of people who can lift you up or lend a hand when you need it.
You've talked a couple of times about connections and you've used the word networking a few times. How would you coach someone who's not good at networking to be better and more comfortable at it to help them in the transition?
Bob, people wouldn't believe it, but I am a shy person and I hate networking. That's why I volunteer, because it makes networking so much easier because you're on a board of directors or you're working at a project where someone right next to you is working on the same project. So it's easier to start a conversation. You don't have to just come up and say, "Hi, I'm Michelle Smith. I'd like to introduce myself." When you have a common goal, even at a chamber luncheon, for example, you can just sit next to someone and then you can automatically start a conversation. You could talk about, what do you think of the meal today? Or are you excited to see this speaker? I think that bridges that gap. It's not cold call, so to speak. It's easier just to kind of talk to people. It's like being in college for the first time and you're asked, what's your name, what's your major, where you're from? You just kind of got to develop those 3 questions and use them all the time. What's your name? Where you work? What do you do? Or come up with some other kind of question like that. And just practice, practice, practice.
If you could make 2 or 3 suggestions to help people make their resume better, what would those 2 or 3 suggestions be?
Formatting does matter. If it's not easy to read, people aren't going to read it. As an HR professional, you see so many resumes come across your desk. And if there are dense blocks of text and it's crammed into 3 pages, you're not going to read it. Think of yourself as a new car and you're writing a commercial for yourself. I would make it concise and easy to read so the recruiter's eyes can just glance over it and get enough information that they're interested in knowing more to call you for an interview.
What are the 2 or 3 most challenging interview questions that you've ever heard about, and how do you best answer them to put you in the best position?
The question, tell me a time when, and then fill in the blanks. I think people forget that you need to explain things in the sense of experience. Tell a good story. Make it interesting so that the interviewer can see what you did to make a difference at that company. You don't want to just rattle off what tasks you did. You want to talk about the changes you implemented, the impact you made. Again, that's those dragon slaying stories. Sit down and write them and remember from every company, what did I do that made such a difference there? Or why did they want to keep me when I had the job offer somewhere else? You need to start supporting yourself and forget about the bragging. You're not bragging, you're just saying, look what I did.
What are the struggles or setbacks you've seen in individuals when they're dealing with a career transition?
I think the anger and the grief, as I said, we define ourselves by what we do. And sometimes it breaks your ego, especially like when Astria closed the hospital here in Yakima. We saw people who'd been there for 30 years, and all of a sudden their world just crashed. Their coworkers were their family. They'd invested in this organization and they thought everything was going to be okay. And then all of a sudden, boom, their world crashed. Some of them couldn't get over the anger to move forward. And when you go into a job interview, you don't want to be talking with kind of gritted teeth about the company you used to work for. You don't want to burn any bridges. So you've got to sit down and let yourself cry and then get to that point where you want to move forward.
I'm doing air quotes here again. Refuse to feel sorry for yourself. End of air quotes. What does that mean to you as we're talking about transition management?
It is easy to fall into that. I feel sorry for me. Woe is me. I don't have a job. And I think you're right. You need to teach yourself, refuse to feel sorry for myself. In fact, I've actually even pinned that little statement or something similar to it on my bathroom mirror. So that if I get up in the morning and I'm down and I know I have to go look for work, that's the first thing I read. And I make it, this is my job for today, is to support myself and look for my next job or my next career. You shouldn't feel ashamed if you take like a stepping stone job. People call them other things, but if you need to pay the bills, it's okay to take a job that you would have at one time thought was below you. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get that dream job. This may be the way to do it. Someone you work with at, say, McDonald's may know someone at John I. Haas who makes the introduction for you. So you can't, again, discount those opportunities. You never know what's around the bend.
That lends itself to my next question. I believe your career, and I think actually life in general, is often what I call curly and not this linear ladder going straight up. What does that curliness in your life and your career mean to you?
Exactly what you said, Bob. The time of working for one company for 30 years, it's never coming back. We're lucky if we stay at a job for 5 years anymore, especially the younger generation. I can honestly say the longest I've ever been anywhere was 8 years. And when I work with people who've been in a job 20 years or more, it's sad to say I wish they would retire because too many people are retired on the job. They're not thinking about new ideas. And I'm generalizing there. Are people who still do. But oftentimes the company stagnates because the staff stagnates. I think curly is good. It makes life more interesting. You have to have the downs to get to the ups, and it makes it so much more fun. And you, like I said, you get to be a lifelong learner. And you can contribute in ways you thought you could never contribute before. The things I've been able to do by having all these different careers, I would have never thought I'd be on a podcast in a million trillion years.
Michelle, what if you have something bad in your past work history, a discipline, maybe even fired? How do you handle that with a potential new employer?
Well, there's all kinds of rules about questions they can ask you now. And there are times when companies let people go. And I think the word fire is really not the case so much anymore. I mean, there may be disciplinary action, but your records are sealed and you don't need to take truth serum when you go into a job interview. You know, they don't have to know that you left that last job because you were asked to leave it. You can just say, you know, there was a difference of opinions, or I wanted to look for a new opportunity. Again, that's that truth serum. You don't have to say too much.
Michelle, do you think transition management and going between jobs is different today somehow than it was, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that the whole millennial generation has changed the way the world of work is going to look. And then again, the pandemic has even changed it much more. I don't think we're going to see people in jobs for probably more than 5 years. And it's accepted that you can leave and move around. I think before maybe it was, I know my dad, who's older, he's 85, has been like, you jump around too much. You need to stay at a job for 25 years. And now he's like, oh, you're right. It is this way. Even if you're at a company like Microsoft for 20 years, you're not going to stay in the same job at Microsoft. Everybody moves to a different position within an organization usually.
Michelle, do you think that being in transition, is it different if you're older or if you're a woman or if you're a minority? Are any of these different at all in managing your transition?
Yes, I do. I'm a Cheyenne River Sioux Indian and I'm a woman, and it has presented different challenges. I may not look Native American, and I guess in some ways that has made it easier for me. But when you're over 50, the challenges are there, although we don't want to believe there's ageism. I definitely think there is. I think that's where LinkedIn has helped a great deal. You can always put your picture in sepia or black and white. People assume that if you're older, you can't learn something new or you don't know technology. It can get daunting. And then likewise, if you've been at a company for some time and you used their specific software, you may not know Excel. You may be manipulating spreadsheets all the time, but you don't know Excel because you're using that customized software. So I think it's even more critical now that we become, again, I hate to say that again, lifelong learner, but you need to reinvent yourself and invest in yourself over and over and over again. I mean, I didn't know Zoom 6 months ago, and I've taken Zoom classes. I didn't know Microsoft Teams. You just need to get out there and keep looking and reading and devouring the new knowledge.
That leads me, Michelle, to my next question. Are there any books or other resources that you'd recommend to someone who's going through transition?
Yeah, the Yakima Valley Library, and actually all libraries in Washington State, have a partnership with Microsoft. So if you go onto their websites, you can get to the Microsoft Imagine Academy, and you can get certified in those programs. And when the libraries reopen in phase 3, they'll even proctor the tests for you so you can get those certifications. LinkedIn has an amazing LinkedIn Learning. They have amazing series on any topic you want. Their videos range from, 40 minutes to 4 hours or a couple days. And then there's also something called gfclearnfree.org. And it is, I think it was started by the Goodwill Foundation, but it's just a website where you can go type in anything you want to know, and it will give you tutorials as well as practice tests. So if you want to know how to use your new iPhone, or you want to take a typing test, believe it or not, or you want to learn how to convert fractions into decimals, all of that's on that one site. And that's something I had never seen before until I got into the workforce system. There's so many tools out there. We think we have to go back to a community college, which is also great, but you can do pretty much anything from a computer now or a smartphone.
Michelle, if our listeners only remember 3 things as they go through their own transition or helping a friend going through transition, what are those 3 things that you want them to take with them from today?
Relax. It's going to be okay. Try and stay positive, and connect. Connect with anyone and everyone you can.
Michelle, I think I can speak for all of the listeners today. You gave great counsel. You were vulnerable and talked about yourself and the struggles that you've gone through in terms of transition as well. You really cared about getting the message out, and you were willing to share that. For all of those reasons and so many more, I want to thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Bob. This was a pleasure. It's scary in transition, but it doesn't need to be. It really can be quite fun and very exciting.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We're working in unprecedented times as the world responds to the recent COVID-19 crisis. The fact is that even those who are not in transition understand it could be right around the corner, next month or a year from now. The purpose of these episodes are to give listeners support and the critical tools to adjust with the winds, wherever they come. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully, perhaps gracefully or without too many battle scars, survived their own obstacle courses and can share useful information on how to steady your ship or your world in this uncertainty. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on social media. If you have any questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time you're investing in sharing these important conversations with me, my guests, and others who are going through life transition. Transitions between jobs, life stages, new entrepreneurial ventures, or whatever life brings. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode of People in Transition.